Hi, Molly. Thank you so much for helping my project. Can you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Molly Martin Connor. Just got married, but haven't changed my name yet because of COVID. And I'm a native Houstonian, and have been living here in my adult life for the past 2.5 or so years, working at a homeless services agency in downtown Houston. Love Houston. My family's here, and I really enjoy growing up here. So it's definitely neat to me that NASIC and Houston play a part in all of this.
How'd you get into homeless services?
Yeah, so I have a master's in social work, and when you do a social work master's, typically you do at least two practicums during that experience, since the field learning is such an important part of kind of operationalizing what you're talking about in class. And my first practicum was at an agency that does homeless services specifically for older adults. And they actually follow a model quite similar to the agency I work at now, which is called Housing First. And so the idea is you move people from the streets first. And then after that is when you start doing the work around substance use recovery, for example. And there's a lot of evidence that it's a more successful model for folks, 'cause it's a big ask to ask somebody to get clean and sober, to get a job when they're sleeping in a tent or under a freeway. And so that's really the model we followed there. And I saw that it really worked for these people we were housing and improved their health outcomes. And so I knew I wanted to move back. My grad program was in Austin, which is a very fun place, don't get me wrong, but I knew that I wanted to move back to Houston to be with my family after, and saw the posting at Search. And I had actually volunteered where I work in high school. So it was like a really nice full circle moment. And now I coordinate volunteers. So it's been fun to be
That's
on both
uh,
sides of it.
that's really neat. I mean, I remember being in Austin a few years back, and there's that homeless shelter downtown, and
Yeah, the
just
arch.
the arch, and just watching how many people were, kind of lining up to kind of go into that shelter. It was just really surprising to me that there's so many homeless people.
Yeah, it's really visible in Austin too, especially in that downtown area. Are you from Texas?
I am. I was born in Houston. I went to a small town in Southeast Texas for like middle school and high school, and then came back here for college. And other than one year where I moved to New Hampshire and decided that snow is not for me, and I'm really Texas, I came back.
Yeah,
So
I went to college in Nashville, and that was cold enough for me. So I can't even imagine New Hampshire.
yeah, it looks pretty on postcards, but whenever it starts piling up around you and stays, it's something different.
Yeah.
Um, wh- oh, I was looking at, well, I whenever people come up and ask, like beggars or what have you, come and ask for money, and several thoughts cross my mind is, am I helping this person by giving to them or not? You know, um, what is the solution to the problem? It just seems so huge in terms of here's a person that's homeless on the street. What I mean, I guess can you talk about kind of uh, one of your favorite stories about success stories of somebody moving from being on the street to kind of having getting on the right track.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a fair question, and I would say probably the most common question we get when we do presentations in the community. And I think ultimately it's a personal choice. People have different comfort levels around the kinds of help they're willing to give. But we always say one solution that works for a lot of folks is just keeping some water in your car, because it's something that people do need every day, and it's something tangible you can do. But maybe there's less questions running through your mind around that. Just as an aside. Yeah, actually, typically what we have a really fantastic story of a gentleman, and the video's on our website if you'd ever be interested in checking it out. But he'd been experiencing homelessness for several years, and unfortunately, like a lot of our clients, had a lot of traumatic experiences as a child, which definitely contributed to the situation he found himself in. And he says, by his own words, admission, he says he had some arrests related to drug use, which were kind of like a wake up call for him, I think. And so he got connected with Search, and he got approved for a housing voucher. So what our outreach team does is we get folks on the wait list essentially for housing here in Houston. Like a lot of cities, there just isn't, unfortunately, enough affordable housing to house everyone who wants to be housed right now, but we're trying. So when you get to the top, we have a team that walks you through the process of getting move-in ready. So a lot of finding ID documents, a lot of folks lose those understandably when they're on the street. And then even getting them household essentials. and in some cases, finding a landlord that will accept their rental voucher. And that was the case for this gentleman. So it actually took a couple months of advocacy on our case manager's part of explaining the voucher to landlords and advocating for this gentleman, but he moved in. He got a job at a grocery store with the help of our employment team, and he's been stably housed. And one thing that's really neat is, like, obviously life has ups and downs for everyone. And for this gentleman, after he got housed, he's had a couple of strokes, which is of course a setback for anyone. But he's stayed connected with Search. Our case managers have connected him with a recovery group related to therapy for that. And so I think of him as a good example because it shows how we really stay with people as they need us. So it's not just about getting the roof over their head. That's super important, and it's a foundation for other changes. But people need support even after they have a roof to make sure that the issues that led to their homelessness don't flare up again. And so yeah, I really like, and his story is very moving. It's called Wendell's Journey. If you'd be interested in watching the video, I usually cry. I've seen it like probably 50 times. And I usually still tear up a little when I watch it because it's just a really powerful story. And I've had the chance to spend some time with him, and he's just a really fantastic man. So yeah.
That's a wonderful story. I've heard, I mean, it seems like overcoming homelessness and poverty, there's also a social aspect to it too, because usually your friends are people in the same life situation that you're in, and that's who you feel most comfortable with. Um, I've heard stories about like a homeless person who wrote like a book, then it became like really popular, and he got a lot of money. Got he got a house and the life, but then after a while he regressed and was back on the street again, just because that's where his comfort place is. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, so in my position, I'm not super frontline, just as a disclaimer, but I would say anecdotally, we definitely know that there's a really strong community on the streets, and that's very helpful in a lot of ways. It makes people feel safer and protected in an environment that's not safe objectively. But it can definitely be really isolating for folks when you move into housing. And so that's actually a lot of what our teams do. Our case managers, COVID has obviously made things a lot more difficult in this area, but typically we organize social events quite often. We do lots of group events. And then we actually have a preschool for children impacted by homelessness as well. And in a similar vein, we are all about building new healthy communities. So connecting people who are in our apartment, the properties where we provide services, with each other, connecting our families at our preschool with one another. And same, like you said, it's somebody who's perhaps can identify with your life experience, is also trying to make some positive changes in their life, and you can build each other up. And just for your reference, our goal as an agency is 90% retention in our housing, because as you said, it can be really difficult and there can be slip ups, and it's sort of like recovery. You kind of expect that there might be some slip ups along the way. And so we just are doing our best to provide that new healthy community so that there's an alternative. But that has definitely been, and again, anecdotally, I think a challenge for our clients during COVID is that community has been, just for all of us, it's very different, taken away. And if you don't have a lot of tech access, which is something that our clients can struggle with, there's both on the like tech literacy side of things and just access to the technology itself, it can be difficult to maintain those connections. So I know that we can all identify with that on some level these past several months.
Is there some like Houston-wide gauge of the homelessness problem and how it's changing over time?
There is actually, that's a great question. Thanks for the opportunity to share, because it's really neat. There's a partnership between the homeless services, both nonprofit agencies, but also governmental entities, the county and the city. It's called The Way Home. So it has its own separate website, and every year we do a count of the people experiencing homelessness. This month, actually, it's always in January. And the Coalition for the Homeless provides the backbone support for The Way Home and publishes that data. Typically, the data is available around May or June for the previous calendar year. We're definitely really curious to see what the data looks like this year, because we do anticipate that unfortunately there's going to be a bit of a spike because of COVID. But in the last 10 years, so 2011 to 2010, the data shows that we reduced homelessness by about 54% in
Oh,
Houston,
wow.
which is super exciting.
Yeah.
And it's because of the collaboration and the referral system that we have among our partners. And it really makes we've been much more successful than some other cities of our comparable size. So it's exciting. COVID's definitely a setback, but I feel really confident that the system we have in place in Houston is good. Hopefully we'll be able to, jump on addressing that as we can.
It's kind of interesting to think about incentives and how they affect people. And this is sort of maybe the controversial side to success. Is there a risk of perhaps being so effective at dealing with homelessness that a city could potentially become more of a attract homelessness from other parts of the country?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have enough information to answer that question. I do think one thing that I would say is true is places that are more affordable to live are people who are in more difficult financial straits are going to be attracted to living in those areas. And I think that is something that Texas has seen as a state. Perhaps in Austin, I think people report that being the case. It's a lot cheaper to live in Texas, as you know, than it is to live in other parts of the country. So I do think sometimes people can move in search of a better life, thinking that, it'll be more affordable for my family to live in this place. And then that can sometimes mean that someone begins experiencing homelessness in your city when they've just moved there. But yeah, it's a good question. I hope that sort of answers it. But I don't know that I can answer it. I don't have enough data to like really answer it.
Right. And it just seems like it's so easy to build like housing. You have like, I mean, it's almost like you need the land and then you just need some wood and you could build some kind of structures and stuff. Is And I know Habitat for Humanity, builds homes, and the people that move in those homes have to put some sweat equity in it. I, what kind of I guess relationships you have had with programs like that to actually not only place people in homes but to actually create the housing?
Yeah, so we ourselves don't do any housing creation, but we're super grateful for our two primary partners that do. They're called New Hope Housing and Temenos Community Development Corporation. And so we essentially partner with them to provide the on-site case management services at the properties that they build. And their properties are specifically designed to house people who meet certain income restrictions or have had experiences of homelessness. But to your point, I had a professor in grad school, and he was fond of saying, and it's true, that I mean, homelessness is solved when everyone has a house. It's at its core, it's a problem that has a very obvious solution, but it's just that a lot of the folks that are left on the streets in particular, since like we've had all that success, which is amazing, but they have some of the higher barriers around housing related to mental health or physical health. And although it's a very cost-effective investment in terms of the money spent to house someone typically is far less than the money spent by taxpayers to fund emergency room visits and fund jail visits and fund sort of some of these things that happen as a result of homelessness. But it does still require some money and some political will. So, but yeah, it's a really interesting thing to think about, I think, because like you said, at its core, it seems like it should have a really straightforward and obvious solution. I also think logistically that sometimes there's a lot of emphasis on people being allowed to live in high opportunity areas, which is great. Living in a place, and the grants will have conditions around that. So the place needs to have good access to transportation, to employment, and then sometimes, as you might guess, areas that are considered higher opportunity, there's more opposition to housing being built in those neighborhoods from the people who already live there. So I think that might be part of it sometimes as well.
Yeah, it's a really complex problem.
No, thanks for asking about it. I appreciate it. I hope I'm not misspeaking, but I appreciate the opportunity to share about it.
No, it sounds great, but is there a dollar figure that would come to mind in terms of being sort of the range that would be needed to solve the homeless problem completely in Houston?
I can find that for you. I should know it off the top of my head. Just give me a second. We have an interesting figure available around at least the cost that we associate with every person we house. Let's see. Let's see. Thanks for your patience.
No worries, no worries.
So yeah, generally speaking, the cost associated with housing, and this is obviously we're rounding numbers and data, is $56,000 a person, but typically it costs around $90,000 when you leave someone on the street in terms of like those unrecouped costs I mentioned related to emergency services. And so there are a little over 4,000 people in Houston experiencing homelessness on any given day. So I guess I can quickly do that math for you.
Yeah, so about $4 million, I think, a little like 3,600,000.
But it is interesting too to think about, and I don't know if but yeah,
I
know
guess it's
that.
more than that. Oh,
Yeah, it looks like it's
like
closer to
36.
a little over. Good old Matt. A little 144 million around.
144 million. Okay.
Yeah. So not an insignificant sum, obviously. So yeah.
Yeah, that's.
But again, cost savings in the long run.
It's a difficult thing. I guess what's the saddest story you've heard of somebody who had a good life and then they ended up on the streets?
I don't know if I can think of a particular story, but we do definitely have folks in our programs. There is something to be said for like the cycle of poverty and homelessness. We definitely see that a lot with our clients, people who just have never been given opportunities. And that's part of why we have the preschool. We're trying to change that. You know, we want these kids to get a really enriching start to their lives. But we do have people in our programs who have college degrees, who did have, I think, lives that would be considered very successful from an outsider's perspective. Typically what we see is some sort of like larger scale medical emergency without any kind of family support or an addiction issue that leads to the loss of family support. I actually heard somebody say on a webinar during the pandemic that homelessness is basically the combination of loss of economic security and loss of social support. So typically, you know, people can get back on their feet if they have an economic emergency, if they have friends and family rallying around them. But for a lot of our clients, given their life circumstances or whatever the family arrangements are, that's not the case. So when that social support network is gone, that's when homelessness arises, basically. And I don't know. I just think it's something that I like to remind people about our programs, because I think sometimes people are really focused on this idea of like independence and people being independent. And we definitely we want our clients to feel self-sufficient and to feel confident that they can address their problems and make goals for themselves. But all of us rely on other people. We just don't do it in ways that are, you know, the way that our clients do, right? But I rely on my family, my friends all the time. But our clients just don't, a lot of them don't have those people. So then they end up relying on our staff. And I think sometimes people think of that in a negative light because they want them to be independent. But I just try and reframe it as it's really something that we all do. It's just that they're just doing it with somebody who's paid to be in that role, but it doesn't make it shameful, you know?
Right. I mean, it's like going to a therapist versus talking to a friend.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, I'm so happy to see that it seems like that's something that there's a lot of stigma that we're losing around that in America. There's just much more awareness around the importance of mental health and people feeling more comfortable talking about using those resources, for sure.
Or another way to look at it is different between eating a meal at home versus going to a restaurant. So
yeah. Sure. We're just nourishing ourselves either way. You know, it's good that we have different avenues available to us.
Look at all those non-independent restaurant goers. Shame.
I've been, you know, I'm glad people are supporting local businesses. Honestly, that's what I've been thinking about this whole pandemic of like, it's good to go out to eat sometimes because it supports people who are, you know, trying to make ends meet just like we are. So.
No, absolutely. But I guess I meant it from the standpoint of having people whose job is to provide certain support that other people get for free and without,
sure.
you know, kind of, I mean, it's like the difference between informal and formal. I mean, obviously going to a restaurant to sit down to get a meal is a formal way of getting your meal prepared that we're quite comfortable with and is actually considered to be advantageous. But whenever it comes to like, or even childcare, I mean, there's another case of, you know, why isn't everybody staying home with their children? Oh, wait, they are. So anyway, that's a different story.
But no, yeah, you're right. Like some of us are lucky enough to have relatives around who can help, or we can do it ourselves, and then others are not in that situation. So
exactly. Well, so I guess coming back to the moon bit, did you know that NASA is planning to send people to the moon in 2024?
Until I heard from you and Cindy, I did not, I'll confess.
Well,
Yeah.
and you would be in the boat with 90% of the non-space people I talk to.
Okay,
So
good.
very, very few people know. But I have a question. What would be the most effective way to have made you known that if NASA was looking to do that? I mean,
Oh, that's such a good question. One thing that I've been thinking about is I've watched a ton of like space related Netflix this pandemic. Like a lot of people, I watched, Space Force and the Challenger miniseries and Away. And so I feel like I've actually been absorbing a lot of content related to space, but just not in the news. I typically get my news on the online. I get a news digest email every morning, and then typically like before bed, I'll look at the Apple News. I definitely see news things on social media, but I try not to rely on social media as my primary source of news. I prefer to like go to the website itself. So yeah, if it had appeared in like Apple News or if there had been some sort of like Netflix special maybe around the previous Apollo and as an intro to Artemis, that might have helped me. No, I guess I don't, I can't claim to regularly look at NASA's website, despite, like I said, being a proud Houstonian. It just doesn't cross my mind to do that. So,
well, and flip the problem around. How much awareness do you think there is in Houston about homelessness and the efforts that you do and things like that? And what kind of challenges do you have in terms of kind of expanding out how how people know about think about homelessness?
yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it was like going back to what we were talking about. There's just a lot of nuance, and I think we all know that sometimes communicating about things that are less black and white can be kind of difficult. It's just difficult. It's harder to make sound bites and things that are easily digested. Um, I also think with homelessness, there's such visibility of people experiencing homelessness in our community, and it understandably makes people feel uncomfortable. And I think a lot of times people have a gut negative reaction to it, whether it's because it makes them sad or it makes them feel unsafe. And so I think for us there's a lot of we're kind of running up against a perception that already exists around the community that we serve, and so trying to kind of change the ideas that people have. And we definitely have some really amazing, our support community is great advocating for us and creating opportunities for us to share. We do a lot of presentations in the community. But yeah, I think it's like that existing perception that we have to struggle up against. I don't know what the equivalent would be for NASA, like what you would perceive to be their barrier. I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Well, as you were talking, at least in the STEM fields, we have like science fairs and, like in the business side, you have like business contests and things like that. It just seems like from like the social impact side, I was wondering if you knew of anything similar to a science fair, but for like social impact.
Hmm. Um, I know things. I mean, there's some really awesome things happening. One of my favorite parts of my job is I do a lot of presentations at schools or for younger people, Girl Scout troops, Boy Scout troops, youth philanthropic organizations, and it makes me feel like so hopeful about how our country might change because these kids have great questions. They are curious and they actually care. You can tell they really care and they understand this is a problem and they want to fix it. And so something that like I know of that we work with is there'll be youth organizations that will do projects where they have to think of a solution to a social issue or they have to like, collaborate with a nonprofit to do service. So I usually serve as our liaison when we do those sorts of things. So I definitely think that when it comes to educating younger people, we've got that avenue, like kind of you said a science fair, which made me think of schools. Um, and then we definitely participate in we'll do fairs at different companies that we partner with where they have social impact focuses. And that's really neat to see too, how so many of these big corporations have a really renewed focus, I think, on their philanthropic investment in the community. So that's something, the adult version, I suppose, avenues that we do have. And then we do what's called speaker series. So we actually organize our own like educational events as well. And COVID has changed those. We have been doing some virtually, just not quite as often.
That is, really important to outreach. I mean, people get so kind of consumed in like their own little bubble. around whatever their topics are, and kind of cross-pollinating is really difficult. Um, but what do you think about us returning to the moon? I mean, how do you feel about it?
Um, I don't know. I have like I have mixed feelings about it. I was talking to my husband about it last night. It, I mean, I think it's super exciting. Like, I definitely think we both find watching. I was mentioning all that space content that we watched. We both find it like super. It's great fun to watch. It's really inspiring. Um, I know we've talked a little bit about how the kiddos at our preschool have done some units on space, and I definitely think that space is a way to get kids involved in STEM in general. So even if they don't end up doing, not that many people end up doing, aerospace, but maybe they get interested in math and science because of that, which is really great. So I like that aspect of it. I definitely like the idea of the international cooperation side of things, like it being a multinational partnership mission. So I also, I know that there's really practical applications for some of the stuff that's been done in space. I think of like telecoms and satellites as the most obvious example, but I'm sure there are others. But I think just because of my line of work, I definitely get a little bit hung up on the use of all that money to do something that feels like really exciting. Like I said, don't get me wrong, but there's just a lot that could be done with $28 billion here in the United States on Earth. And I also think, while I definitely agree that we are not treating the Earth well, and that I don't feel like especially hopeful about the future of our Earth when it comes to climate change, it feels sort of just like sad to just sort of say like, well, we give up. We're not going to be able to fix the Earth, and so we're going to look to other planets. And maybe that's just me being naive, but it just makes me feel a little bit sad to sort of think that we've just kind of like decided that the Earth isn't sustainable and that we have to look elsewhere. But like I said, I have mixed feelings. I definitely don't think it's a bad idea. I just also was just thinking about, other ways that money could be spent, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, opportunity cost is definitely a big concern, and it's kind of funny, you hear that I hear that a lot from people about this idea that we need to go and explore other planets because something happens to Earth. The interesting thing is, based upon the current knowledge and understanding of the solar system, regardless of how bad we mess up the Earth will still be many times better than any other place we know about in the solar system. And whatever we would have to do to live in those other places could actually be done here on a messed up Earth, much cheaper than those other places. So
Yeah. I guess also like something we were talking about last night. I do understand too that part of the argument is like, 500 years ago, no one could have conceived of the way we live now. It would have just like blown their minds to think of the technology we have and the knowledge we have of our universe. So we don't know what we don't know, right? And there's no way for us to broaden our perspective unless we explore. So I definitely understand that side of it and why that is appealing to people from a non planetary concern specific perspective of just like what is out there. Like you said, all we know right now suggests this is the best place, but maybe not. I don't know.
yeah, that's true. Definitely. Well, did you know that Jeff Bezos has a space company?
I did know that. Yeah, Blue Origin. Is that
Yep,
him?
that's it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have just because UT has a big aerospace engineering program. I have a few friends who I don't know anything about what they do. Couldn't tell you details, but they work there after college.
I know we're right at the hour, and I imagine you probably have a packed schedule. Do you have a little bit more time, or?
Yeah, sure. No worries.
Okay. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Elon Musk with SpaceX is talking about building a million-person city on Mars because he's like, we need to have a backup plan, and he's thinking more of, you know, big asteroid hitting the Earth type thing, or a
Interesting.
pandemic, which who would think that would happen? Anyway, and things like that. And then Jeff Bezos is really big in the space company because he wants to take all those Earth harming activities like energy production and heavy manufacturing and heavy industry and actually use the resources of the solar system and move them off of Earth to protect the Earth. So that's kind of interesting there. But
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, do you have an idea on when the last time we had people on the moon was? Like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Gosh. No, I have no idea.
Would you believe 1972?
Wow. That actually makes me feel better. I would have guessed the 70s. I do. I mean, I did read. Obviously, I think it's awesome that they're going to do a male female mission. I mean, that's really neat for women. But yeah, so it's 2024, right? So that'll have been like 52 years. Wow.
I know, yeah, and it's very doubtful that 2024 actually happened. It'd probably be 2026 or 2027 or something like that. Just based upon the way these things go.
Wow. No,
Um,
I didn't. I wouldn't. I maybe would have. My gut would have been like 70s or 80s, but I wouldn't have realized early 70s.
yeah, and if it was safe and affordable, would you go to space?
I wouldn't, but I'll just tell you, I'm an extremely risk averse person. So no is the answer. But that being said, like my brother-in-law would be like the first person to sign up for that. So I think yeah, I'm just generally not like a super I'm not very fun. So I would not sign up. But props to people who would. I think it's really neat. Yeah.
And what do you think is the riskiest part of the journey?
Oh. Um oh gosh, this is totally based on watching TV. To me, it seems like there's always like they're gonna run out of water, like there's a supply constraint issue seems to always be um, if you assuming you like you said, the safety of the actual launch and like the vehicle once you're in, I guess I don't is orbit the right term?
Mhm.
Okay. um I would get worried about like supply constraint. And to me, the other thing is like I know this isn't a safety question per se, but communications with people on Earth, that makes me nervous thinking about that distance that you are away from people that you love. Yeah.
Um, there's this company in Florida called Space Perspectives, and they're
Okay.
planning to have this big capsule that can hold like 9 people at a time, and they'll have a big hydrogen balloon that will take you to like the edge of the stratosphere, and so it's like an all-day journey, like up and down.
Wow.
Um, but you can see like the blackness of space and the curvature of the Earth, and it's a nice general ride. Um, what do you think about that from a risk and fear factor?
Huh. Um, I guess I'd be okay with that if I knew it was just a day. A shorter term commitment. I'm not like scared of heights or anything. It's not that aspect of it. It's just like it's really to me like that issue of like thinking about that duration of time of being away from regular supplies and so like the scarcity fear and then people I love. But I think I could do a day. It's not, yeah, I'm not as scared of the concept of being that far away from the earth so much.
Well, Blue Origin has another passenger vehicle that holds 6 people. It's called New Shepard. It's a rocket. It takes you up to like 100 miles and down. The entire trip is like 15 minutes.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
eh, if time is your thing, that seems like
That's the way to go. If you don't mind me asking, how did you get so enthusiastic about all of this stuff and so knowledgeable?
well, definitely talking to over 400 people helped. But we have the North Houston Space Society up here.
Oh, yeah, I saw your email about that.
So I guess all those are really kind of like the results of that. I was interested in space as a child. Then the internet happened and took off, and then my career followed the internet. Then Elon started, doing things with space. Then kind of got excited again, and
Yeah.
then and also that in combination with like maybe midlife. You like kind of go. Then you get in the routine of work, and you're like, is there? You're looking for something
Yeah,
meaningful
sure.
to do. So.
Nice. I mean, that's really neat.
Yeah, and this is actually meant as a personal improvement project because I was working from home before everybody else was for several years. So like
Good, you
in
got
20
practice.
yeah, in 2019 I was planning to do all these in person, just to force me to get out and interact with human beings instead of screens. So
Well, you're doing both, so it's okay. You found a way to do both simultaneously.
and actually one thing that occurred to me was a similar type of project but with homeless people. Like I was thinking like lunch with a homeless person, and you could like sit down and have a meal and record like the conversation, and people
Interesting. We do
could
have
see.
it's funny, we have in normal times, we've had to put it on hold, but we do have like a fellowship building program where that's kind of the idea is just to give people a chance to have a conversation with someone who's experiencing homelessness. And I think in general, both parties find it very helpful. Just because it can be, I think it just like humanizes the other person in both eyes, which we all is something I think is a good experience for everyone to have. Good reminder about difference and how, reconciliation and conversation are still possible.
Yeah, and that people are worthy of dignity and respect and consideration.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
So, well, Molly, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
I don't think so. Thank you. Yeah, no, this was fun. I hope I didn't embarrass myself with my answers, but it was fun. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
I didn't see anything embarrassing, so it seemed good to
One thing
me.
I just thought of is we actually had the Space Center come to a presentation in our preschool a while back now, but I also send you some photos when we get off, just for your, that's really fun and cute.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Well,
Yeah, thank you again.
okay. Stay in touch and talk to you later.
We'll do. Talk to you later. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.